Welcome everybody. This is Brother Dan Goodwin, your host. God's Final Jubilee program coming to you on this Sunday night. And good to be with you today. I just want to share a verse with you from the Word of God. 2 Timothy chapter 3. In verse 1 says this, "This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come." Perilous times. That word perilous comes from the word peril, which means danger. And we certainly are in dangerous times. Let me read you a story that I just found on the internet here, on the Drudge Report. It says this, exclusive, U.S. preparing to put nuclear bombers back on 24-hour alert. Well, I guess it's about time. What do you think? If the order comes, the B-52s will return to a ready-to-fly posture not seen since the Cold War. Barksdale Air Force Base, Louisiana, the U.S. Air Force is preparing to put nuclear-armed bombers back on 24-hour ready alert, a status not seen since 1991, the Cold War, when the Cold War ended. This means the long dormant concrete pads at the ends of the base's 11,000-foot runway, dubbed the Christmas tree for their angular markings, could once again find several B-52s parked on them, laden with nuclear weapons and set to take off at a moment's notice. This is yet one more step in ensuring that we're prepared, General David Goldfein, Air Force Chief of Staff, said in an interview during his 6-day tour. So that's one thing that's going on out there. But there's other things that I want to share with you. I want to talk to you tonight for just a few minutes about what's going on with Russia. This Russia stuff that keeps going on. We've got a special counsel that's been hired by Congress because Mr. Sessions, Attorney General Sessions, recused himself. The Assistant Attorney General appointed somebody to investigate this Russian nonsense, and that's what it is as far as the collusion with the Trump administration. Folks, absolutely no evidence. Have you ever heard of anything like this in your life? No evidence, and yet a special counsel was placed to investigate something that has no evidence. So he's got about 16 lawyers working for him, and we're paying for that, our tax dollars. Unbelievable what's going on in our country. Here we got a Republican Senate, Republican House, Republican President, and are we investigating Hillary? No. Are we investigating Huma? No. Are we investigating the money laundering foundation of the Clintons? No. Are we investigating the fact that Hillary gave away 20% of America's uranium to Russia, and that Bill Clinton spoke there and met with Mr. Putin, got $500,000 for a speech, and all this money sent from Russia to the Clinton Foundation while Hillary is the Secretary of State? Is that being investigated? No, we're investigating something that has no evidence. Are we investigating the fact that Hillary Clinton had top secret emails on a non-secure server that the Russians were able to tap into? No. What are we investigating in this country? We're investigating Mr. Trump and his staff supposedly colluding with Russia. So here we are. But I want to share something with you here. Let me go back and find something for you. Let's see, here we go. This is it. I've got a story here from the Washington something or other. Washington Times. I'm going to read you a story. But while that's opening up, I want to share something with you. About 8 months ago, when the election was going on, I was on standby to go on live with the Hagman and Hagman report. Joe Hagman and Doug Hagman, many of you know who they are. Good men, I love those guys. And I was on standby. It was the election night. And I was going to go on. I didn't get on. They didn't get to me for whatever reason, but the election was going on. I was going to tell them sometime around 6 p.m. or 7 p.m., whatever time it was, long before the election was called, before anybody realized what was happening, I was going to go on record and I was going to tell them that if there wasn't fraud, if they didn't steal the election, I was going to make this bold statement. And by the way, I told this to some other people, so some other folks can can substantiate what I'm saying here. I'm not just saying this after the fact. I told several other people that Donald Trump, if fraud didn't take over and they didn't steal the election somehow, I was going to go on record that evening, early in the election result, before any election results were released, I was going to make the bold statement that Donald Trump was going to win in a landslide. And by the way, he did win in a landslide. You know, the night before the election day, Donald Trump was up in Michigan. There were like 40,000 people rooting and hollering and screaming and cheering for Donald Trump up in Michigan, which at that time was considered to be Hillary's state. In fact, she didn't even campaign in Michigan because it was a done deal. Michigan was going to go Democrat. You know what? I looked at that, and of course I looked at what was going on for the last few months before the election, and I said, there's no way that somebody with the following like Donald Trump had, there's no way you can lose. And I was going to go on record and make that claim. Of course, they didn't get to me, and that's okay. It was a busy night. But I was going to make that claim and didn't get to it. So, and I also have been making this statement before the election. And different preachers will tell you, I've shared this. I've shared it at churches. I've shared it in prophecy conferences. This was a hugely important election to the Democrats. Why is that? Because I made this statement. I said if Hillary Clinton loses the election and Donald Trump wins, or Ted Cruz, whoever's going to win the nomination at the time, I said this is so important because if Hillary Clinton loses the election and the Republicans take the White House, keep Congress, then people will go to jail. I was serious about that. I'm still serious about that. Why is that? Because there's been so many laws broken, all the way from Benghazi. That was gun running going on in Benghazi. I mean, clear as a bell what happened in Benghazi. We heard it tonight. In fact, Mitt Romney, I mean, this goes way back to the last election, remember? Obama's second term and him against Romney, it looked like the tide was turning. Romney started to ask the questions about Benghazi. It had just happened during the right before the election. And he started to go there and talk about Benghazi. Remember that woman that was running moderating that? She told him, pointed right at him, said that that's not true. Something a moderator has no right to do, by the way. And by the way, the moderator was wrong. Mitt Romney was right. So he started to go there, and then he backed off. And by the way, lost the election, I believe, that night. Because of that. He should have went after Benghazi, should have went after Obama that night, and he didn't. He backed off. But there were many of us that already knew, and the word was already out. This was about gun running. And I said that if Hillary loses the election, 2016, that people would go to jail. Now, so far, the only person gone to jail is Huma Abinadab's, or whatever you call her name, Huma's husband. Who's gone to jail because he texted a 16-year-old girl. By the way, on that computer that guy, or Huma's husband, had was some of these government emails and very probably some secret, top secret, classified emails. But nobody else has gone to jail, just a man, a wicked man who was texting a 16-year-old girl. So let me share a story from the Washington Times. This is interesting. See, stuff is starting to happen all of a sudden. All of a sudden, the attention is starting to shift from Donald Trump and the collusion thing. It's starting to shift to the real story here, which is Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, and their Attorney General, and Obama, President Obama at the time, and what they had going on with Russia. The real Russian story is the Democrats. And all of a sudden, the story's starting to shift. Now, let me read you this. This is from the Washington Times, dated Wednesday, October 18th, just a few days ago. And here's what it says. Apparently, it's Bill and Hillary Clinton who've been doing the behind-the-scenes and suspicious dealings with Russia all along. And perhaps others in the Barack Obama administration, too. You think Special Counsel Robert Mueller might switch the target of his investigation anytime soon? Don't hold your breath for that. Seems a bit time wasting, not to mention taxpayer dollar wasting, to keep on the Trump trail, desperately searching for signs of a collusion that just didn't happen. Futile is a word that comes to mind. This is from the article, the Washington Times. Better to dig deeper into this, as reported by The Hill. Before the Obama administration approved a controversial deal in 2010, giving Moscow, all the way back to 2010 now, he gave Moscow control, now this was under Hillary, gave Moscow control over a large swath of American uranium. I believe 20% is the name, that is what's out there. The FBI had gathered substantial evidence that Russian nuclear industry officials were engaged in bribery, kickbacks, extortion, and money laundering designed to grow Putin's atomic energy business inside the United States. Now, this was going on and understood by the FBI in 2010. Interesting, by the way, the guy in charge of the FBI at that time, guess who it was? Robert Mueller, the guy who is now investigating Donald Trump for collusion when he himself was at the head of the FBI and knew these things. Do you understand the crimes that are being committed in our government? Do you understand what's really going on behind the scenes here? You realize, well, that's what I meant before the election, that if Donald Trump got elected, there would be people going to jail. And we haven't gotten in. They haven't gotten into this stuff yet. Now, don't ask me why. Attorney General Sessions, for whatever reason, is not, at least as far as we know. Now, we don't know what's really going on behind the scenes. I hope that somebody in the Justice Department is going after these people, because this is high treason in our government. You remember FBI, or remember the IRS director, Lynch? Remember her, or whatever her name was? She's still out there. Nobody ever prosecuted her for using the IRS against its political opponents. All the corruption that's been going on. Let me read a little more here. Intercepted emails show that Russia had actually gained an inroad in America and compromised a U.S. uranium trucking firm with bribes. Now, this is the Washington Times. But this is the bigger news. There's bigger news than that. The feds also found an eyewitness who provided documented evidence to show that these Russia nuke officials had sent millions of dollars to the Trump Foundation? No, the Clinton Foundation. We're investigating the wrong people here. We're investigating Trump. We need to be investigating these people. You want to follow the money here. Let me read this again. The bigger news, the feds found an eyewitness who provided documented evidence. Now, Mueller is investigating something that there's absolutely no evidence. He's trying to find evidence. Here is real evidence of a federal crime, of treason against our nation. There's evidence, documented evidence, to show that these Russia nuke officials had sent millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation, not the Trump administration, not the Trump people, not the Trump Tower, the Clinton Foundation, at a time when Hillary was serving as Secretary of State, and she was deeply involved in this. That's why she was paid billions of dollars. At a time when Hillary was serving as the Secretary of State, I said billions, millions, I probably should have said, and on a government body that extended favor to Russia. Of course, this isn't exactly new. Way back in April 2015, the New York Times ran this headline: "Cash flowed to Clinton Foundation amid Russian uranium deal." And among its many, many lines was this one: "As the Russians," and I quote, "as the Russians gradually assumed control of uranium one in 3 separate transactions from 2009 to 2013, Canadian records show a flow of cash made its way to the Clinton Foundation." That flow of cash was from Russia to the Clinton Foundation. Why? Favors and briberies to get what they wanted. Now there's the real story of Russia and Russiagate, whatever you want to call it. All right, in fact, that flow of cash was actually 4 separate flows of cash for a total amount of $2.3 million given to the Clinton Foundation. And we also learned from this New York Times piece back in 2015 Those contributions were not publicly disclosed by the Clintons. Remember that? Remember that they were trying to find records of where the money was coming to the Clinton Foundation? Remember all the controversy over that? Here it is. All right. A lot of this was also uncovered. As outlined by other writers, as well as John Rappaport, investigative journalist, comes to mind, as well as Peter Schweitzer of Clinton Cash author fame. But what is coming to light is what others knew and when. Now listen to this. Let's see. The Fed suspected as early as 2009. Now that's right after Mr. Obama became the president. 2009. Remember the election of 2008, January 09, he becomes the president. 2009, the Fed suspected that Russia was engaged in its dirty dealing, and the United States under Barack Obama's administration did nothing. Nothing. All of a sudden, they're worried about Russia involved in our country. It was them that did nothing. Rather than bring immediate charges in 2010, however, the Department of Justice, which is now the Obama Department of Justice, not the Bush Department of Justice, continued investigating the matter for nearly 4 more years, essentially leaving the American public and Congress in the dark about Russian nuclear corruption on U.S. soil during a period when the Obama administration made 2 major decisions benefiting Putin's commercial nuclear ambitions. The Hill wrote, here's what the Hill wrote, American people want to know, was U.S. Secretary compromised by the Obama-Clinton deals with Russia? Mueller's tasked with the wrong job. If he really wants to find out if America's interests were compromised in any way by Russia, he needs to quit looking Trump's way and start digging deep into the Clintons and, yes, the Obama administration. The Hill asked both Clinton and then Attorney General Eric Holder for comment. Now, this is recently. Curiously, neither Eric Holder or Hillary Clinton, neither of them had anything to say at this time. Their silence is both telling and unacceptable. Now, if only the same leftists who've been clamoring for impeachment of Trump over supposed collusion with Russia would similarly demand answers about Clinton, Holder, and Obama, maybe we'd get to the bottom of this. So this is the Washington Times, just on Wednesday. You can look at it. It's on my Facebook page. You can look at it there. In fact, it's on my other page. I'll send that to the God's Found Jubilee page as soon as I get off here. So if you go to God's Found Jubilee Facebook page, you can read the story here that I posted. And there's many more of these. I mean, the corruption of the former administration is mind-boggling. I said back during back before the election, I said, if Trump gets elected, there'll be people going to jail. Hillary should go to jail. Bill Clinton, Eric Holder, Attorney General Lynch, others, they've committed crimes. There's no doubt about this. This isn't something we think or we wonder, but this is true. We've known this for a long time. These stories are starting to come out. Did you happen to see Hannity recently on Fox News just a few days ago? I mean, he spent a whole show. He really hit this. But you know what? All day, it just seems like all they're talking about now is that guy in Hollywood that took advantage of all those women. And if that happened, and I guess it did, it's a terrible thing. But you know what? There are bigger stories than that. These are the stories of the hour. These are the stories that need to be out there. And what are we talking about? We're either talking about the sex maniac out there in Hollywood, or we're talking about the phone call that Trump made to the widow of one of the soldiers, the 4 Green Berets that died. And so they've made those the stories when these are the real stories. And of course, you know, God bless those 4 men and their families. And our hearts go out anytime a soldier dies. But what a tragedy that's been blown up, and that represented that woman that supposedly claims she heard the phone call. She heard one side of a phone call, and she listened into something that was none of her business. And she has spoken out of turn. She ought to be schooled, and she ought to be thrown out of office by her fellow congressmen in office. She ought to be thrown out of there. And unbelievable what she has done. But this is a smokescreen now from the real story. If I was Hillary if I was these Democrats, I'd be scared. But I said before the election that this was the most important election in the history of the Democrat Party because they've committed high treason, and if the wrong guy gets elected, there'll be people go to jail. Now, we'll see if that happens. It ought to happen. And it ought to be no more investigating of Mr. Trump. They ought to be investigating the real bad stuff. And there ought to be people brought before Congress and then brought to the grand jury and charges brought. And these people need to be tried. And if found guilty, need to be punished to the full extent of the law. High treason has been committed here. Friend, these are perilous times we're living in because our own government, people within our own country, are the real threat to America, not the people in other countries, not ISIS. And ISIS is certainly a problem. I'm not belittling that. But I'm telling you, it's the people within our own country, the leftists and the socialists and the communists right here in our government. I'm talking about the Nancy Pelosi's and that crowd. I mean socialist, communist people in our government. Unbelievable. And so get these stories out there and share this with your friends out there. Go and look the story up for yourself, and there's many other stories like it. Let's pray that this takes off and steamrolls, and let's pray that this gets out there and that Congress begins investigating this and doing the job. And fire Mr. Mueller, get him out of there, send that man packing, him and his 16 henchmen. Get them out of there, and let's investigate the real treason that's been going on behind our backs right here in our government. And you're listening to the God's Final Jubilee program, the website, godsfinaljubilee.com. And I invite you to go and check out the website. From the website, you can get to the YouTube channel. You can get to the Facebook page, my blog, and also the bookstore. Don't forget the brand new book, The Mystery of the Jubilee, is doing very well. People are very excited about it, and several of you have already mentioned that you've read the book and liked it. So that's on the website, so go check that out. And so pray for our leaders in our government. Pray for Mr. Trump. And pray that the truth be known. And we'll see you next time.